Welcome back to Why Should We Care About African Data Centers, a podcast where we tackle the big questions shaping the industry. My guest today is Thelma Quaye, Director for Digital Infrastructure, Skills and Empowerment at Smart Africa. She leads one of Africa's most ambitious efforts to expand broadband, cloud, data centers, and digital skills. Smart Africa is a bold Pan-African initiative backed by 40 member states. Guided by a board of heads of state, it works to fast-track digital transformation and create a truly connected single digital market. In this episode, we discuss how Smart Africa works with partners like the EU to shape policy, build infrastructure, and grow the skills needed to scale Africa's digital economy. Here's my conversation with Thelma Quaye.
My name is Thelma Quaye. I am the Director in charge of Digital Infrastructure, Skills and Empowerment at Smart Africa. And what I do is to oversee strategy, policy formulation, government advisory, project delivery when it comes to topics around broadband, devices, affordable devices, data centers, cloud, digital skills, as well as women empowerment.
And what is Smart Africa, for those who don't know already?
Smart Africa is a Pan-African organization founded in 2013 with the heads of states, 7 heads of states who decided that the digital transformation of Africa needed to be accelerated. Now we do this through a multi-stakeholder approach with the Africa Union and ITU chairing our steering committee, and then the heads of states sitting on our board and guiding on what we have to do. As I mentioned, it's a Pan-African organization. However, our membership is based on demand. So we want countries to come up to say, I believe in this vision of transforming Africa into a single digital market, and I want to lead this specific project. So with each of our 40 member states at the moment, lead one project or the other. It could be broadband, it could be devices, it could be digital ID. Each country member leads a Pan-African project. And that's what we are, and we are known for our pragmatic DNA. We also have private sector membership, academia, civil society, as well as other international bodies such as the World Bank, the ITU, as I mentioned earlier, AFDB, and a lot more.
Great. Such an important position in the development of digital infrastructure on the continent. Us being EU Commission funded initiative, so we are really interested in how Smart Africa is already working with international partners such as EU to accelerate digital infrastructure development in Africa.
So recently we had signed an administrative agreement with the EU Commission, which we're excited about. The focus would be on e-governance, e-commerce and e-payments. However, back in 2020 is when we started working with the EU or one of the EU members, BMZ, GIZ. And how this collaboration has grown is that it took us from the level of developing documents, developing studies, developing blueprints, concept notes, to now the level of implementation. So I'll give you an example where the BMZ played an instrumental role. We have a project where we want to be able to make internet affordable in Africa. You would know by statistics that even though 80% of Africa is covered, a vast majority of people are not able to use internet service because of the costs. The service is not affordable or devices are not affordable. And so through the support of BMZ GIZ, we did a study in a simulation study. We did a simulation study on what we call the bulk capacity marketplace. Now, this project is supposed to aggregate data across countries, and we leverage volumes to negotiate prices of internet downwards. When we did the simulation through the support of the BMZ, we saw that we could cut down the costs of internet by as much as 50% in countries that are landlocked and as high as 90% in countries that are not landlocked. And so this study was really powerful and revealing. Since that, we've been able to get 12 countries to sign on to this project. And we are working now with the likes of the World Bank to see how we can scale it up to the other countries. So this is just one example. There are several others. We worked again with BMZ on data governance, where we developed a Pan-African blueprint on data governance. Again, this is related to infrastructure because data is the bedrock of the digital economy. And so, out of this blueprint, we are supporting at least 3 countries to develop their national data strategies. And at this point, we are supporting more countries. Now, what happens after this is that these countries are now able to define clearly, know exactly what they want to do with their data. Because hitherto, a lot of these countries know that, oh, I have data, I have this, but what do I do with it? So the support of governments, like the German government, helps us to streamline these strategies, helps us also to develop policies and regulation. The other members that we've been working with within the EU is the Norwegian government, NORAD, specifically on our skills development. NORAD supported in developing the Pan-African ICT skills and capacity building blueprint, which gave a whole lot of recommendations, out of which we have the Smart Africa Digital Academy, which is now training tens of thousands of policy and decision makers across Africa. Shall I go on?
Oh no, go carry on, please. This is very important for us to hear, and of course, for the audience, that how these institutional partnerships work in practice and what kind of impact we can make together. So please carry on. What we love to hear these practical examples.
Awesome. So the other European partner we've been working with very well is the Norwegian government through NORAD. NORAD supported Smart Africa and Africa in developing a Pan-African ICT skills and capacity building blueprint, which gave us a whole lot of recommendations. Now, one of such recommendations that has come to stay is the Smart Africa Digital Academy. Now, the beauty of it is after NORAD support, we got also BMZ support to implement this recommendation that came from the blueprint. And this platform called SADA has grown to train tens of thousands of policy and decision makers across Africa, whilst we are also now working with other development agencies like the MasterCard Foundation to be able to train and focus on youth and entrepreneurs. So you see that seed funding from NORAD has given us a lot of ripple effect and is still growing. Another focus area from NORAD has been women. NORAD again supported Smart Africa in developing gender impact assessments, right? There are a lot of, talk about gender, there are a lot of work on gender, but there's no access assessment. So what this funding does is to support us to now measure, because you cannot, you don't know when you don't measure. And so this helps us to measure. We are also going ahead to develop a mentorship framework, which we are looking to launch during our upcoming Transform Africa Summit with our first ladies across Africa. This is the first time we'll be, having first ladies do such a thing. And such a powerful platform is with the help of, the Norwegian government. I'll give you a third partner that we've worked with, which is the Agence France Développement. We worked with them around cybersecurity. Again, the support they gave us was to develop a Pan-African cybersecurity blueprint. And this blueprint gave a number of recommendations on what has to be done in terms of policies, regulations, talent, technology. And I'm happy to say that it didn't stop at just a blueprint. That is the pragmatism that comes with Smart Africa. we have gone ahead to implement what we call the Cybersecurity Innovation Center in Abidjan, Cote d'Ivoire. And what that center does is to train cyber talents for Africa. We are not just training, we are partnering with private sector to put this pipeline of talent into job job placements. So after training, they are also going into jobs, and this is really catalytic. It's really life changing. It's an opportunity that we are truly grateful for. Again, as you know, as an outcome of this cybersecurity blueprint, came the African Network of Cybersecurity Authorities. Again, that was the first ever where we've put together all authorities of cybersecurity in various countries, and they are working together to harmonize policies, harmonize regulations, work together either bilaterally or multilaterally. But also, we are setting up a regional CERT in North Africa. So you see, this is how catalytic such supports can be. And we are very proud to be associated with the European Commission and their members and the impact that we are creating together.
Yeah, that sounds like a very wide partnership model. Anything what I hear from your your answer is that we work together from bringing the cost of internet down, which we've seen across the world being an extremely effective way to make an impact. Also, like boosting the digital economy and all that. To skills, partnering, bring the skills to the youth in the continent. Plus, of course, then looking at effective regulation and how we can together possibly implement that. So that's a 360-degree partnership. Happy to hear. So let's get to the second thing, which is funding and investments into digital infrastructure. So the African digital market is expected to be worth 180 billion by the end of this year, 2025. How should countries and investors plan to raise the billions needed for digital infrastructure?
So at this point, we need to be thinking outside the box when it comes to digital infrastructure financing. If you look at it, typically, digital infrastructure financing and implementation has been private sector led. It has been majorly the mobile network operators in Africa. If you look at where we still lack in terms of digital infrastructure in Africa, whether it's connectivity, whether it's data centers, it's because the conventional model does not make sense anymore. It's because the return on investment that we are looking for, leveraging what has happened in the past, is not working anymore. And so we need to pivot and be innovative. Together with the UN Broadband Commission, Smart Africa worked with other stakeholders, a whole lot of stakeholders, to develop a guideline called the 21st Century Financing Model. And this document gave four recommendations, four main recommendations. The first one is that we need to broaden the base of contributors. So as I said, it has heavily been mobile network operators leading the way in terms of investment. But now, how about the non-traditional investors? How about the private sector? How about the digital economy beneficiaries, those who really need digital infrastructure to be able to cascade their products or their services? So we need to, take a look at broadening that base. And then we also need to reform our Universal Access and Service Fund. So you would know that averagely every mobile network operator in Africa has to be able to contribute 1 to 3% of their annual revenue to a COFEX that is supposed to be used for, universal access, usually for rural access. A number of countries have been very successful with that model, using that fund for what it's supposed to be. But there are also a number of countries that have not been successful in terms of utilizing that fund for what it's supposed to be used for, expanding connectivity in rural areas. And so it's time that we create reforms around it. And reforms would mean transparency, accountability, and governments having the will to use the funds for what it has to be. Now, this builds on the previous point of broadening the base of contributors, because you will not be able to convince new people or other people to contribute to this base if the current base is not used properly. So that's the second point. The third point is that we need to reallocate a portion of revenues generated by ICT industry players towards digital infrastructure investment. And finally, we need to explore creation of international or regional digital development funds. So this was the four recommendations by the UN Broadband Commission. So after the UN Broadband Commission work, what Smart Africa has done is to work together with BMZ and GIZ to now create an African contextualized framework for innovative financing. And as I said, this means that we need to now go out of, the conventional contributors. We need to look at public-private partnerships. How can governments give concessions to private sector so they can invest? How can we make sure that we have stable electricity, for instance, so that when investors are coming, they are assured that even if they invest, electricity won't be a problem and they stand a chance of recouping their money? How can we make sure that the contribution base is broadened? So that's something that we are currently working on. And then after that, we are not stopping there. We are going to start implementing it in 2 countries that have come up to say, I want this. So together with Rwanda and Nigeria. And as you can imagine, you can't get any better countries than Rwanda and Nigeria. Nigeria is so huge, so big. Rwanda is very small and very agile. Not to say that Nigeria is not agile, but I think it will give us a perfect blend and a perfect example when we want to scale up this implementation. After this framework, which takes into context Africa's uniqueness, we would go into implementation with Rwanda and Nigeria to see the outcomes, to take learnings, and then we can move it forward.
So once again, it's kind of like multi-approach. You want to keep on raising awareness of Africa as an investment destination and potential place for future growth, for foreign direct investment. But at the same time, like try to look at different ways how to raise money from within Africa already, and try to have the private sector on the continent be involved in investing and make those connections between public and private sector even more impactful. So what are now the biggest obstacles between governments and private companies when it comes to, let's move now to the data center development. So what are some of the biggest obstacles kind of stopping that, or not enabling those partnerships in the data center development in the continent?
I'll talk about 2 of them, or maybe 3. So for me, the first one is the fact that we have fragmented regulation. If you went to Europe to implement data centers, it's easy because they have the GDPR and it applies everywhere. And it's easy because when you're investing in Ireland, you wouldn't have any problem with somebody from Germany using that data center in Ireland, for instance. Now, for us, data centers are capital intensive. And so for an investor to invest that much in Rwanda, for instance, and not having the harmonized regulation for somebody from Uganda, Kenya, Morocco to utilize this infrastructure is not worth it. And so the first challenge is harmonized regulation. And that's something that we are working on. to be able to, at least from the data governance point of view, if we're able to harmonize our regulation on a regional basis, it's easier to attract these investments. But also another challenge is the multi-sectorial nature of the domain. You would need land access, you need energy, you need, the regulations that I've spoken about. And very, very often, these fall under different ministries, different authorities, and there's a lot of silos even within the countries. And so this is something that we need to look at in terms of industry policy alignment. If we are going to focus on digital transformation as a pivotal change or something that can change Africa's economic landscape, we need to now probably look at it from a thematic point of view. So if somebody wants to invest in data centers, what are the things that are required? Can we put all these requirements under one roof so that it's easier for the person, for instance? Can we put the land access people, the power reliability people, the data, can we put all of these people under one roof so it's easier for the investor? And then finally, I mentioned the two already. The last one is the low in initial market demand. Again, I think that technology has the power to break down our geographical boundaries. However, we haven't harnessed it to its highest potential. So an entrepreneur in Ghana is still looking at the Ghana market. But if we now open up the market through platforms or even through mindset change, it now allows investors to be attracted because they are not, even if the data center is situated in Ghana, the investor knows that he's not only focusing on the Ghana market and he's rather focusing on everywhere else.
Everything you say is extremely exciting, important, and similar topics that we've discussed with the private sector throughout this podcast. I'd like to take you back to the regulation question for a second, if that's okay. Do you believe in like a Pan-African version of GDPR, or would more like a regional East African, South African, West African, North African separate GDPRs be more realistic, or could you speak about the vision you have? Like, how will that look like?
Absolutely. This is something that is very dear to my heart. So,
Yeah, great.
so first of all, GDPR is good, but I don't think it's right for Africa. The reason being that GDPR is written within a certain context, and it's within the context of Europe. There's a history. There's how the culture is. There's how business is done. Africa is at a point where we need to balance attracting investments with also protecting our privacy. And so even if we used the GDPR as a template, we would need to contextualize it within our within our context. You don't want to be too stiff to chase away investors, but also you don't want to be too relaxed to put the privacy of your people out there. So we need to find that balance. That being said, we would also need to do it from a bottom-up approach, where we will, and it has started already. We would have to do from a regional basis before we now build it up on a Pan-African level. And I'll explain why. Africa is very diverse. We are very, very diverse. The cultures, the understanding, the requirements in West Africa may not necessarily be similar to the requirements in Northern Africa, for instance, or Southern Africa. And then in terms of how we are, politically structured, it makes sense to do it on a regional basis. So ECOWAS, EACAS, SADC, the Central African region. It's better they do it in a regional basis, on a regional basis, and then we can harmonize it now on a Pan-African level. And we've done it before, using one project we call the One Africa Network, where we harmonized the policy based on what has already been done on a regional level to make sure that there is similarity. And this project is supposed to be a project where you have free roaming, you can move with one SIM across Africa, and you would not be charged those high exorbitant rates. So yes, I think both approaches would have to be applied, being that we first start from a regional level and build up to a continental level.
Makes a lot of sense, and as you mentioned also, I think it can also potentially be one of the drivers of demand in the future when the data has to be protected on the continent rather than in Europe or Middle East or wherever. So maybe that's going to be one of the push factors, or I say maybe it's a pull factor actually, for example the big hyperscalers to really scale on the continent, bring their equipment here at scale, and therefore drive the future demand. Okay, so theme 4. Future outlook and strategic vision. So, what policy or regulatory changes would have the biggest impact on accelerating digital infrastructure growth in the continent?
I think the first one will be harmonized regulations, right? Harmonized regulations would go a long way, one, to help us attract investment for data centers and cloud, for even 5G expansion, for all the related data centers, and even undersea cables. The second one, we need to encourage open access and infrastructure sharing. This is the fastest way that we would be able to move forward. Open access infrastructure sharing would be a key policy that we need to be able to encourage to reduce the cost of entry in terms of capex, and also to democratize the market. And once it's democratized, it helps the beneficiaries or the end users to now have access, to now have options, and there's competition as well. Then, for me, there should be a long-term digital infrastructure investments platform, a regional one. Just like we have the National Universal Access Funds, we need to look at how do we put together a regional digital infrastructure fund, long term, keeping sustainability in mind, and making sure that it's transparent and it's easily accountable. And finally, our data, cross-border data flows. At this point, I'm not impressed with it. We need to, and we're working to make sure that we are impacting it. We need to make sure that we are leveraging technology to break down the geographical boundaries, so that it's easier to trade across countries, it's easier to share data across countries, it's easier also to leverage the whole population of 1.4 billion rather than a single population of a country.
And if you had a magic wand, what would need to happen? Who would need to be on the same table to make this all happen?
Well, so if I had a magic wand, it would be Smart Africa, and of course the development finance institutions, because we need funds to do this. Because Smart Africa is able to do it, but most importantly, what I would need from government is the will to do it. That's it. It's just the will to do it. So Smart Africa, the will of the government and the DFIs, we are done and we'll be able to do it.
Okay, we hope that we get everyone needed on the table as soon as possible, so we can accelerate these things. Okay, thank you, Thelma. Is there anything else that you would like to add that you feel like you didn't have a chance to mention, something you would like to raise still?
The European country we've had the longest relationship with is BMZ, and it's been very fruitful from all that we've discussed. Um, my my comment to most DFIs would be that it's always better to take a bottom up approach. And I see it changing as we go along. In terms of initially, it was we come and we know what the problem is, and this is what you have to do. It has to shift, and it is shifting, and we are happy that it's shifting to, taking real life problems, taking on ground problems, not assuming that you know the problem, taking feedback from people who are on ground to to focus your investment on. That's a much more impactful way of spending money, in my opinion.
This podcast is part of the Data Governance in Africa initiative, helping the African Union shape data policies, enable cross-border data flows, and build secure, sustainable digital infrastructure. Funded by the EU and 5 member states, it supports a unified digital market in Africa.